Hi everyone, it's Chloe coming to you live from the editing room. This week, Cody sat down with Kyle Decker, who is a cinematographer, director, and video producer. Kyle's roots really are in action sports, particularly skiing. After growing up in his hometown of Elyria, Ohio, he went and worked as an unpaid intern for Level 1 in 2006. And if you're not familiar with the ski industry, then Level 1 is like top tier production agencies. They put out some of the greatest ski films. So he quickly worked his way up and actually ended up directing some of Level 1's most prolific films. He's worked alongside a lot of the top athletes in the free skiing community, including Tom Wallish, Henrik Harlow, and Tanner Hall. Kyle regularly contributes to the X Games broadcasts a la ESPN, but he also does a lot of editing and content creation for brands that we all know and love, like Carhartt, Bose, Monster, GoPro, and regularly works with the US ski and snowboard teams as well. He's kind of known as like the industry hype man. A lot of people that have had the chance to collaborate with him note how much enthusiasm and positivity he brings to shoots and how he just really brings everybody's mood up. So he's a multifaceted talent who's mastered visually capturing stories both on and off the mountain. He's an industry leader. He's definitely a path paver. So enjoy today's episode.
Welcome to the Path Pavers podcast.
All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Path Pavers. We have a very special guest today by the name of Kyle Decker, and I will let him explain what he does and his profession. But as you know, on the podcast, we are specifically asking individuals who we consider path pavers or mavericks in their profession that they found a profession where they express themselves authentically, find meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in it. And on this podcast, we're trying to test the hypothesis that if you want to find interesting work, you must pave your own path. So don't follow a path, leave a trail in a way. And we feel that Kyle fits that profile perfectly. And with that being said, we will get started. How we define something is telling. It begins to highlight our identity and who we are. With that being said, how do you express or define your profession? Or in other words, what do you do?
I run a boutique video production company that specializes in a wide range of things that used to be specifically action sports. It's branded and went into commercial work and branded content. Now I'm in corporate videos.
All right. Question 2. Every passionate professional I have spoken with finds purpose, fulfillment, and or meaning in what they do. Often they are in pursuit of something. With that being said, what are you in pursuit of when it comes to your profession?
It's a good question. Generally, just in a pursuit of always getting a little bit better, even if it's from shoot to shoot, always fine tuning one little thing and always thinking, you want to get here and then you get here and you want to get here. So just kind of always chasing kind of your own personal, internal goals and judgments, and kind of always feeling like you don't fit in the room, and surrounding yourself by people that you're extremely inspired by. Those become your friends. You step up a notch hanging out with them, they step up, and it's kind of a ladder where you kind of grow together.
Thank you. So I totally agree with that point. And I think that's a tough riddle. And for me, even, today in life, how do you get into the rooms that you just said, like, you don't fit in? And then how do you surround yourself with people that you're inspired by? Because I totally agree with that sentiment, but sometimes it's hard to do.
A little bit of background, like I used to be wildly inspired by and obsessed with ski films and skate films. And I don't know, I just eventually started making them with my friends. Next thing you know, I got an internship, worked unpaid for a company that I really wanted to be part of. And then once you're in or have any access to being where you wanted to go, I just wildly passionate and try to be the hardest working dude in the room. But also you want to be that hardest working guy in the room because you're just like excited that you're even in that space. So I feel like as long as you work extremely hard and you're passionate, it just kind of like snowballs and eventually gets you to where you wanted to go. But by the time you get there, you have a whole new set of goals. So you never actually get the chance to kind of sit back and appreciate it because you're always on to the next thing. So I kind of wish sometimes you could be more present and say, oh my God, I got here. This is sweet. Let's appreciate it, move on. But it's kind of just like, kind of just attached to what you like and just go all in on it.
Yeah, I try to follow the same advice and give the same advice whenever I'm talking to an individual who's not happy with what they do, or even, a new college grad. I'm like, what are you interested in? What are you curious about? Because if you find your interest or are driven by your curiosity, working hard, which is funny, it'll lead into the next question perfectly, isn't as much of a challenge. But if you ever done something you really don't want to do and you see no value in doing it either, and you would rather be anywhere else on the planet than do it, like that is so hard, right? And so my next question for you is, what does working hard look like for you?
I mean, there's obviously the mental strain of working hard. It's getting the job, doing the pre-production, making sure the shoot's dialed, going through the shoot, editing, and dealing with everything after that. And then the other one is just physically working hard, like go out there and give everything you got and just kind of put it all out there for the day. And hopefully you end the day and you're kind of proud at what you put together, and combining those two, like see where that goes.
Is there like a level of like being present? Is it an attitude? Because it doesn't seem like you're measuring it from hours. I think sometimes it's convenient to measure working hard by hours, right? Like, why put in 60-hour weeks or 80-hour weeks? And I can understand that measurement, but that doesn't sound like what you're saying.
Yeah, and I noticed when I am around, worked with various types of crews, when you're around people that are, attached to a union or more concerned about hours, I feel like that passion we're talking about, or just drive, kind of drops, where people are like, I'm here for X amount of hours to make X amount of money. And I feel like that doesn't turn on your like internal drive. And kind of to circle back, like when I started doing this, I didn't care about the money because I was young and didn't have major responsibilities and made just enough to get by. But because you kept doing what I loved, it turned into something that actually started to make more of a living. So I think that's something where people get clouded at first, is they go to college and they say, I want to make a ton of money. I want this house. I want this boat. And you're chasing the money and not what you care about. Where if you chase what you care about, what you love, like it might not happen in a year, but you're going to find, if you're passionate and work super hard, you're going to find the path, down that channel. But when people just chase money, I don't think you necessarily get the same results. Obviously, some people it works really well for, and kudos to them.
Thank you for making that connection. I worked in recruitment and staffing for the better half of a decade, and a lot of that work was based on hourly rates. And so I was in that hourly world, but I never drew this connection that the individuals that are focused on hours, that could cloud the judgment from a passionate perspective. And I think you were spot on. And sometimes the most obvious things are like that are right in front of us, because I have to focus in what I do in my profession. I have to focus on the rhetoric someone uses. I have to focus on the questions they ask, and I have to focus on really their attitude, because I'm a firm believer that the environment you operate in, and the opportunities you're given are going to heavily dictate your talents and your abilities. I mean, and I make this silly analogy, but my father's an immigrant from Italy and he's in the produce world. So I just grew up around produce and gardens and vegetables my entire life. And I use the analogy that, like, I live in the Midwest in Wisconsin. If I wanted to have a lemon tree, it's never going to work just because I don't have the right environment for it. It doesn't make me a bad gardener, and it doesn't make the lemon tree a bad seed. It's just not a fit. And I sometimes find this in professions where you put an individual just in the wrong environment and then they cannot flourish. But if you put someone in the right environment, sometimes they awaken dormant elements, or if you give someone the right opportunity, they can actually do something they didn't know they were capable of doing because they were never given that opportunity. And Eleanor Roosevelt said this like much more poetically than I'm about to say it. She was on an interview and someone asked her, like, who do you think would be a better president? These two. And she's like, well, I have no idea, because they've never been given the opportunity, and sometimes the opportunity presents the character of the man. And I just thought that was like the perfect answer, because like, how are you supposed to know if someone's going to be good in X position if they've never given that opportunity? And so, kind of to your point of, if you're just focused on the hours, you're just focused on the money, then you're going to miss, I think, a lot of the opportunities to, I think, to flourish or to find out things about yourself, because you're focused on the wrong metrics in a way, like hours and money, etc. So I can very much relate to that. Unfortunately, that was not obvious to me when I was younger. Why is that something that you were able to understand, or how did you understand that so early? Because I know you started doing this in high school with your buddies. That's kind of when your filmmaking career was, I think, originated or was born. But how did you take that approach of like, I'm going to do this and follow my passion and interest and not worry about the money or whatever the other, I guess, distractions could be?
Well, I was I went the traditional path. I did high school, and then I did 3 years of college. Was studying marketing. Was going to go get an office job, or who knows what I was planning on doing. But my dad died at 48 when I was like 20, 21 years old, and that totally changed the trajectory of just kind of what I valued. Really, really made me realize, like, life is short. Do what you love. You might not be here tomorrow. And I was just taking risks. Like, I was so lost and couldn't study, dropped out the next semester, just couldn't focus. Had an opportunity to be an intern at this ski film production company, Level One, that I just was obsessed with at the time. And I'm like, what a great opportunity to channel my like energy and just like negative energy and just into something wildly positive. And I just kept chasing it. There wasn't like a plan. There wasn't a business plan of, I want to make this much every year and move on and move on. I was just like, it's what I wanted to do. And after the internship, I was like, wait, I can get paid for this. And it just kind of snowballed. But I'd say that was really the turning point, is an unfortunate event that ended up having, ended up with good results.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Obviously, I'm sorry to hear about your father. I lost my mother when I was young too, and I can, you can find some.
Sorry.
If you're patient enough, you see that there's some beauty that can come out of it, And I always say, like, having daughters was like the best thing ever, because like it filled a hole in my heart I didn't know I had. And so to your point, it kind of like awakened you in a way that you maybe didn't know you needed to be awakened. And so, but it doesn't ever make it worth it. I know we would both, it's a feeling that, you never really get over, right? I think you get a little bit stronger, but I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, I think trauma and just adversity along the way makes you a stronger person, even though you don't want it at the time. And some of that ends up leading to, I don't know, you to take non-traditional paths.
And those are my favorite people. I really do. Like, those are my heroes, people I love, because the untraditional path, or paving your own path, which is the way I refer to it, until you do it, you don't feel or recognize how hard it is. And then as I started to do it, when I see other people who have done it and have succeeded and done it, and they're great people and their character, it's just like I admire them, because I feel that they are taking the biggest advantage of life in that moment, and oftentimes, I think of my grandfather passed away from COPD a few years ago, I think now. And every his anniversary, I always go for a hard run, just to appreciate being able to breathe. So, I don't know if you've ever seen someone like that has like a lung disease and then struggling for breath. And it's like, over here, I complain about whatever it could be, but it's like, I can take a deep breath. Like, imagine struggling for a deep breath. And so it does help put things into perspective, like you said. And sometimes we need that. I think it's important. All right. So question 4, I believe. So I'm going to start off with a really interesting quote from Booker T. Washington. And I like this quote when I read it. It says, "I have learned success is to be measured not so much by the position one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he has overcome while trying to succeed. What are the obstacles that challenged you the most, but looking back, you're the most proud of?
I think almost the last question we discussed is probably it, because, was one of the biggest challenges of my life, was in a really tough place, and I spun it and made something out of it. I made a positive out of it. So I'd say that was like hands down the biggest challenge. Next biggest challenge after that, like I got comfortable with the company I did get an internship with for 7 years. I ended up co-directing their last film and loved where I was, loved who I worked with, but I had an opportunity to work with another professional skier, Tom Wallish, on a solo project, which just wildly, wildly inspired me to do something that really hasn't been done just with one person, work with them all year. But I had to take a risk and leave my comfort zone. And that was probably another one of the biggest like challenges, because I had to tell the people that I love working with and still some of my good friends, hey, I'm going to move on and do something else. But on the other side of that, there was also just a wild amount of passion to like get into something new. And it's nothing offensive to what I was currently doing. It's just like, it's fun to mix it up and try something new.
Did you make that decision based on your level of passion and excitement for it? Or how do you make that decision?
I mean, honestly, from the second the opportunity was brought to me, I just was so excited about it. I couldn't think about anything else. And I knew I had to make that decision, but I don't like disappointing people, and especially your friends. And that was the challenging part, is I had to sit down with the people I work with and say, hey, there's something I want to do, and I'm going to have to kind of move on. It was almost like a breakup, because these are people you worked with. We lived in the same house together. When we hung out on weekends, you're hanging out with them. So it was tough to do.
I can see that. Is this a fair assessment? And not about you, and this is more in generals and relating to the hypothesis that I've found that when someone finds interesting profession that they express themselves authentically in and feel connected to, making the decisions like the one you just made isn't as hard as much as like maybe the conversations you have to have. But like making that decision was relatively easy, it seems like.
It sounds like it after the time, but you could say, yes, you made it up in your mind, but you had to convince yourself that it's the right decision, because you have all that internal dialogue that you're battling with, and you're concerned about what people are going to, how it's going to affect your friends, what they're going to say. Just like, am I making the right decision? Because like you could do that, you could spin off and it might take off. Like a couple of months into the project, the guy I was shooting with had a big knee injury, and that could have been the end of the season and the end of that project. And I would have like kind of shot myself in the foot, but it ended up being one of my like more memorable projects, and went on to do a lot more with him and created something similar to what I did with the previous company, just with Tom Wallish and some other friends we worked with.
Gotcha. So that's not.
But it was a risk for
that's sure. That's not the way you look at it. It was still really hard. It was, even though you felt it, you still had to kind of persuade yourself to believe it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because you finally get yourself in that room we keep talking about. You're in the room with people you feel like you don't deserve to be in, and then you see a better opportunity, and you're like, I want that, but if that doesn't work, does the rug get pulled out? Like, is the party over? And I felt like that all the way till I stopped like full-time making ski films. Is like, I don't know, you always feel like it's too good to be true. Somebody's gonna come. It's almost like an imposter syndrome. You feel like you're so lucky to be there, you don't belong in the room, and at some point somebody's gonna say, hey man, party's over, pack it up, we're going to work this in this cubicle or whatever it might be. And that was a fear.
It's my biggest fear.
It's not doing what you want to do, love doing.
100%. And my wife thinks it's hilarious. She's like, I just can't believe that's your biggest fear. And it's like, well, I mean, I've done it before. Like I've put on, I call it like a mask that just doesn't fit, and you just have to put this on every day. And over time, the mask almost like forms to you, and then you lose yourself. You almost like trade yourself for this. And I mean, you just almost deteriorate, over time. And I've been there at the one company. I've only worked for two companies in my career. They're both longer stints. And and they were both great companies. I just was no longer, fit. It was more me changing, not them or the environment. I remember one on the first company I left, I woke up on a Wednesday and I just like couldn't take it anymore. I was like, I didn't know who I was looking at in the mirror, and I quit that day, that morning. And I like promised myself that I would never let myself get to that point again, and recognize, and that's where I think this hypothesis was like the birth of the origin of it, that like what you do matters. Like it's important, and I think it's important to who you actually become. And if you continue to pretend to be someone you're not, I mean, over time, you're probably going to become that thing, whatever, for better or for worse.
Just having purpose.
Exactly. Next question. I believe we're on number 5 now. So this is one of my favorites. Now we're going to get into more like your mindset and your process and how you approach your profession and just think about it. So what is something you do that is opposite or considered against the grain in your profession? Or in other words, what aspects of your profession do you rebel the most?
It's different in action sports versus the corporate world, because I think the corporate world, you do need to fit more of a specific mold. But I would say in that world, I rebel most against the imageries made in that world because of my past experiences. So I can apply years of experiences of like capturing essentially great B-roll, bringing life to it and presenting it to an audience, where somebody in the corporate world that, went to college for film and has been working full-time for corporations just gets ground down from the corporate world. You're told to do X, Y, and Z. And sometimes I push back against that, even in revisions with clients, because I know it could be a better product, but I just don't want to fit that like X, Y, and Z mold. And it's like really easy to do, but I kind of want to apply my previous experiences into what I'm doing now, or put my own spin on what's out there.
You kind of try to blend the world of ski and action sports into the corporate world, which is kind of a little more stale or traditional.
Yeah, the style of it, or just B-roll, just a little bit more like dynamic motion life than guy in a tripod, locked off, no energy. Kind of apply some of those same principles from a different world into, corporate and branded content, just to give it a little bit more life. Because at the end of the day, they're looking for an audience that wants to watch this, and we're not just producing a video to check a box. Like, you want to make something that you're excited about, and if you're excited about it, the client's gonna be excited as well.
I agree. Question number 6. So I believe actions express priorities. What are your priorities and non-negotiables as an individual and as a professional?
I'd say, like, as an individual, my priorities are I value like good relationships, having fun, spending time with my family, like, and professional, good communication, people being on time, like those two things, and just like caring about what you're producing. And then you could say both of those worlds sometimes don't mix when you're trying to balance time for your family and putting all in with your work.
Not easy to do. Do you block off your schedule in ways where you're like I'm assuming you're still doing the bedtime because you have young kids like me, where you have like this bedtime routine, and I love it. It's fun reading books and, bath time and all that fun stuff. So have you moved your schedule around where you have this block is family time, you're not available? Like for me, like I have Sundays. I work Saturdays, so I'd say I work 6 days a week, but Sundays to me is a non-negotiable. It's a total family day. I'm very rarely by my phone. And then putting the girls to bed, I look at it from like a month perspective, like 80 to 90% of the month is a non-negotiable. If I'm going to miss a bedtime, it has to be a relatively good reason. Is that how you set up your schedule, or how do you approach it?
I mean, it's pretty dynamic because being a freelance contractor, there's times where, I'll be home for a few days or editing for a week. So I can be extra present with the kids, or I can do drop off at school or put them to bed. But I say it's dynamic because all of a sudden there could be a job next week that says, hey, we need you on the East Coast for a week. So my wife and I just have to talk through it and say, okay, can you handle this X, Y, and Z? We figure out if it's possible, and then she steps in a lot, which I'm extremely thankful for. Back when I'm home again, I tried just to do my best to, make up for that. There's no cut and dry. Like, as you know, it's really, really challenging, and I always want to do and feel like I could do better, but I also don't want to beat myself up, because I feel like with this line of work, I'm also probably home more than somebody that works a 9 to 5 at an office. It just looks different than your traditional relationship.
Yeah, your profession's a little more dynamic because of that. I think it's like you have these projects or these films or these shoots, and so it's heavy duty, and you got to be on site wherever you're going. Where a lot of times my profession, like I can be at home or be on a Zoom video or the case may be, and so I have that. I think that luxury of less travel. So that makes total sense. What's the best idea you never acted on? What's the best idea you ever had? And how often do you have ideas, and what do you do with them?
Well, I think everyone has a lot of crazy ideas that run through their head. It's just what you end up acting on. I think there's some bigger ideas that I regret not doing. Like, back when I made ski films, there's a few different types of projects I wanted to do, but at the time didn't know how to source the budget, or they ended up just not happening. But, there's ones of, I filmed a lot of people skiing around the streets, and I just kept wanting to go to more exotic places because it's fun. We did Moscow, we did all over Scandinavia, but I wanted to go to like either China or somewhere, Kyrgyzstan, I believe, but just all these exotic places, and make kind of a travel piece based around it. And then the skiers are skiing in the city, but you also get to experience the culture. So kind of like a Anthony Bourdain, where his focus is food. This would be on skiing, and then you'd kind of grab the culture around that. So that was one. There was one with Tom Wallish. We wanted to do go to this ice festival in northern China where they made all these ice sculptures, like massive city in ice. And then after the event was over, light it really cool and kind of find ways to ski on it. Kind of your typical one-off Red Bull style projects. It's fun to think about them, but sometimes at the time, depending on the athlete you're working with or the sponsors you have, it just doesn't financially make sense. But it's always fun to think about.
No, that sounds really cool. So when you have ideas, what do you do with them? Do you write them down? Do you store them anywhere? Do you have any kind of process?
I'm a list man. Apple Notes is, if Apple Notes went down, my life would totally, I have a note for every possible thing in my life, for inspirations, for things to do, business development, like whatever because sometimes I don't have the best memory, but I'll write it down, come back to it, and then kind of process, was that important? And if it is, make it more of a priority. But notes also can be a downside if you're making too much on your to-do list, because then it kind of breaks your focus on like what needs to get done.
I'm a big notes guy myself. Do you start out pen and paper and then transfer to notes, or do you just go directly to notes?
Never pen and paper. It's just faster to go in notes. It syncs everywhere. I'm a left-handed guy, so my penmanship's wrong. I write a little, kind of smear the ink. It's just not a good thing. So I'm glad I don't need to take notes in everyday life. But some people love it.
I had
it
this
works.
weird relationship with pen and paper that like I feel like I don't know, have to do it, but I feel like when I do it, it just feels better. I don't know. I almost feel like weird if I don't have any pen and paper over a week and I just go straight to notes, but it just makes the process so unnecessarily longer, and there's just so much wasted time. But I'm a big notes guy myself.
It's more organic. Like if you were holding an iPad in front of me, I would think you're watching something, where a pen and a paper is natural. It's normal. But if you were on a device, I would feel like you were distracted doing
It's
something
interesting.
else.
I never thought about that, but you're right.
I find that when I ask interview questions a lot in video is, I'll print it out. Even though I have it on my phone, it breaks that connection and makes people think you are actually paying attention versus checking your email. Or
it's great. And I never really connected the two together. That's great. That's a great little nugget of knowledge there. When you interview people, do you have scripted questions that you're trying to get, or do you try to have it be a little bit unstructured and see where it takes you?
A little bit of both. Corporate world, they usually provide the questions because they know the answers they want. And if it's branded content, I kind of gear questions based on what I want to hear. I've been really, really into the documentary style. I mean, my wife is a therapist, so she's helped me a ton with producing questions, but she would always say, you're asking questions that you want to hear a specific answer versus asking a question to let them talk and then do a follow-up based on, she said, most of your nuggets are going to be not in the response, but listening to what they're interested in and steer them in that direction. But that works more in documentary versus, a corporate video where it needs to be 60, 90-second video. You need a very specific in, middle, out. When you're trying to get a real story out of someone with feeling and emotion, that's where it's more of a conversation and it's less scripted. Because, if I'm asking you about something you care a lot about and I'm sitting there reading a question, I'm not interested. It just looks like I'm just waiting for the next question and I'm not interested in what you actually said. So that is a craft that I'm constantly fine tuning and plenty of room for improvement, but you have the upper hand in that.
I totally agree with you. And you're providing so much, I think wisdom for me from a totally different perspective. Cause I'm very, being in front of the camera is very new to me. Being behind the camera is foreign to me. This whole world of creating content and even, and you create more, I think, art, and film. And so I wouldn't even put it in the same category of what, we're doing, but I love the type of filmmaking that you do. And it's different because it has this artistic nature to it. Like you said, with the B-roll and even the music choices, the angles of what I'm looking at. And as you were talking and you're doing a little bit more corporate stuff now, man, I just want a company to just be like, hey, Kyle, go crazy. Do whatever you want to do as long as it's on brand. Like, here's our brand, but outside of that, go crazy. And I'd be really interested to see what you would come up with. I think it would be still really authentic, but so different that it would be attractive. I always feel like I'm trying to find something that's familiar but new, right? It's like, okay, this is familiar, but I've never seen this before. And I always feel like that can be adopted a little bit smoother.
Yeah. And that goes into, you take you skiing, snowboarding, skateboarding, and sometimes there'll be an outsider that comes in and tries to produce content. And if it's not authentically created, these core industries see right through that and will eat it up. And sometimes it could be more of a negative impact that somebody paid a bunch of money to have a production company come in versus have the creators from a Within do it. And that was something that kind of really helped me in my career, because I kind of fell into some great opportunities just because I was the guy in the industry, and certain brands when the Olympics started coming around needed branded content. And I just happened to be at the right place at the right time once again. But it all comes down to producing authentic content, because if you make a boring corporate video with no special messaging or feel, you're just checking a box. And I try to avoid that, even though, a lot of companies are checking boxes for specific reasons. I think there's ways to spice it up a little.
Do you say no to clients that are too creatively constraining?
In action sports, I would absolutely, because I feel like I'm much more passionate about it. But if somebody has a project that they want, I'm going to listen to them and I'm going to produce the best thing I can do based on what they want, because that's what I'm getting paid to do. I might give them advice and steer them in certain directions, and I can still add spice to that with still figuring out what the constraints are. But as long as they communicate, and that's key, what they want, we can make something awesome. But sometimes communication or even explaining what it is they want can be a challenge.
I don't know. I just was curious from an artist's perspective if there's ever a lack of connection or a fit, and you're just based on what you're asking for, I might not be able to produce it, and it's better for me just to be honest and upfront with you, because sometimes from my profession standpoint, what they're seeking, I'm just not the best person to do that.
It would be the biggest factor, and that I will say no to, is budget constraint. Somebody might come to you with this huge idea. I love your idea, but we got $1,000, and it's like, okay, well, it's not going to work. A lot of people have these really big ideas and don't understand, if you want it to look like a real commercial, you have to have a hire a whole team to do lighting, and it requires a big crew. And I think what people think they're going to get for the price, and once you start to break down all the itemized pieces to get that polish of a product, that's when you start to negotiate, okay, where's the middle ground? Like, and then I feel like I'm falling into a category where I can produce a polished product at a reasonable cost versus, a 50-person crew that's going to cost you, 10, 20x. It's always finding the balance of what can we produce for your budget, and is it going to be meaningful, or where you could advise them to add budget or trim expectations. And that's kind of the challenge these days.
Yeah, I could see that. So what does like the most interesting work opportunity or project look like for you today?
Without considering the fact that I need to be around as being a parent, I would love to do another ski project or a final ski project. It might be with some people I've worked with or some of the newer kids, but there's so much talent out there. It'd be super fun, but realistically, I think I might be just in a different place in life that it's not as practical. And I think now I'm starting to really get into like documentary or storytelling. I don't necessarily love the editing part, and I love, just being in a room when somebody's spilling out like these just insane stories of their life, and it's emotional, and you're in that room, and like I'm starting to really, really get into that, and just like, and then you're, in that person's house or in their like personal space capturing B-roll, and it's just, you feel so connected to the project. There ends up being so much content and storytelling that I love to pass that off to someone who specializes in that, and then sit down at the end and just watch and enjoy it. But yeah, I think something, just being in rooms with interesting people, hearing people's stories.
I agree. I always say like my measurement in life, like of success, if I became the most interesting person I could. And same thing with you. Like I just want to work with interesting people on interesting opportunities. I really don't care the profession or the domain or what it is. And then you're kind of searching for like, well, what defines interesting, and I think for me it goes to like a level of authenticity, someone who expresses themselves in their profession or craft, and then we're trying to do something, maybe different but familiar, or new but familiar, and I like that type of criteria myself.
Yeah, you have those feels and passions back in the room versus more of a corporate messaging, or even like a ski brand that has a specific message that, this is just what we want. It's like, you don't know what's going to happen. And just like, it's just that feeling of being part of something. Same as it was when you get an insane clip skiing. People call it clip high, but you actually feel high for like several hours after, because you're just part of something special, and there's just no drug or anything that can like explain it. But when you get a really good shot or you have a really good shoot, you drive home and you're like, you just like, it's insane because you've been doing it for so long, but you still get clip
That's
high.
awesome. I love that. I'm a golfer like 4 months out of the year because I live in Wisconsin, so it's only like good enough to golf really 4 months.
Sure.
And it's the same way. It's like, it's like, and obviously it's not my profession. It's not anything I'm even like close, but you just get that feeling like, oh my God, like that was so fun or so good, or, and then, with what Chloe and I do, we get, it's definitely what we would call it clip high, but we get, I think like the passion of the other individual is contagious to us. And so whenever, almost like sometimes after a podcast, we'll have like a podcast high, because that individual's passion and excitement, came through to us, and that transfer of energy. And so, but the clip high is really cool. It's fun. I could see how you capturing, a move for the first time, or something that was so unplanned or unexpected, could just be so exciting. You know what I mean? I could totally see that.
Everyone's like work just comes together like your podcast. Like you put a bunch of effort into it, and when everything works out, it feels incredible. You accomplish your goal, and then you're on to the next one.
You're borderline surprised. Like, I can't believe this worked. I can't believe this happened. Like yeah. I'm like, here, like go. This, like we should put a bookshelf back. You're like, oh, that looks better. Like we should have done that a long time ago. Last question for you. Do you have heroes? If so, what do you admire about them or what attracts you to them?
I don't have like specific heroes, or that's a tough question. I think like I've probably had I've had heroes in different stages of my life that have gotten you to just be a better person or grow. You know, starts with your parents, obviously, family, and then when you get into your career, like, you know, it could be Josh Berman from Level One and Friedel for taking a chance and hiring me, and then next it would be Tom Wallish for taking a chance and helping me grow and get to the next stage, along with his agent, Tom Yaps, who also on the side of that growth just helped me get a little bit more of a business sense and helped guide me. And then, you know, it continues to grow, but there's not like a specific person. I think if I had some time to think about it, I may have one, but just your friends and the people around you that helped you.
Yeah, I think you're world class at cultivating a great environment around you. And that's not easy to do, but I think it makes all the difference. One of the first lessons my father ever taught me was he taught me in metaphors because English was his second language, but he's like, Cody, if you walk with a man with a limp, over time you'll develop a limp. And his way of expressing that who you're around, they're going to rub off on you, and you're going to pick up their tendencies and their habits, sometimes unconsciously, like you don't even know. And so be thoughtful with who you surround yourself with. And I took that lesson to heart, and I have I was lucky enough to like meet a group of guys that were all motivated and wanted to make something of their life, but we had fun along the way too, of course. We're still like friends to this day, 20 plus years later. And I think being around them in my childhood and growing up, and then us continuing to be friends all through high school and college, and then now into our middle age, whatever, how old we are now. I believe that has made all the difference for sure.
Thank you. I think circling back, I kind of regret, I almost said it in the beginning when you were asking about things that set you on your path, and it's totally your tribe. Like, you were saying work environments and everything, and you kind of alluded to it, but I feel like just being around the people you're around is kind of everything. Because if you're surrounded by people that keep throwing negative energy around, but when you're around people, it's like telling you can do more. And it's like, really? Okay, let's give it a try. And then you see them back to it, and you're inspired by them, and they're inspired by you, and you continue to grow together. I think growing by yourself, just at least for me, doesn't work. I need I want to be a hype man, and it's good to have a couple hype men and women around you.
Is having someone believe in you, especially in moments that maybe you don't believe in yourself, it just goes so far. That little thing like, oh, I think you can do this, or no, you can, or giving you that opportunity, like you said, like the apprenticeship, like that goes so far. And I believe in, and everything, that we do is like, I believe in giving people a thoughtful chance. We don't want to do a foolish gamble, put someone in a position or an opportunity that failure is all but inevitable. But it's like, can we take a thoughtful chance, like a thoughtful risk on someone? Like, let's see what happens. Let's go for it versus, I think, trying to mitigate all the risk. Because there's always going to be risk involved, right? Let's just avoid unnecessary risk, right? Like, it's plan or prepare accordingly, or be a little bit more thoughtful with the questions, the criteria, whatever the case may be. But I'm such a huge fan of taking a thoughtful chance on someone and believing in them. And that's why I think our profession is so important, because if you have a group of people, a team that are all in pursuit of something, that is a dangerous team. But if you just have a group of individuals that are just plugging in and plugging out, check in, check out,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big difference. It's a massive difference. And I think everyone yearns for this,
Totally. There's so many. For being a contractor, I've had so many bosses, because every shoot essentially has a client or somebody you're working under. I know plenty of people that I would basically stand in front of a train for, like there's people that like just invest so much in you or care about you. And it's just the little things, but they're your hype man, and I would do anything for them. Where the people that don't really care or are just like, hey, this is a job, and in 8 hours we're out of here. I don't have that same feeling. It's not that I don't put the same, I just put a different type of energy into the project. When you feel like the people around you, you just become a team, and like I said, tribe. Like you just thrive off of that, and then you make cool stuff.
It's that simple, right? It kind of just happens. I feel like if you get the team right, it kind of randomly happens. And obviously looking back, it always makes sense. Kind of like, like how you said, like, well, that wasn't the easiest decision, leaving this job and doing this solo project. But now when I'm talking about it, like it was a no-brainer. I knew that was the right decision, but I still had to go through the process of convincing myself and understanding the risks that to me, that was a thoughtful chance that you took. You took a chance on yourself and this other individual. And that wasn't a foolish gamble or anything of that nature. Obviously it could have still not worked out, but I think we're all happy it did. First and foremost, thank you so much for your time and your honesty and transparency and everything you've shared today.
Thank you.
I can't wait to listen to this back. I mean, as much notes as I took, I still, wanted to be present, and there's a few other nuggets in there that I know I didn't get down, but I want to give you a chance to say any last comments. Again, like the purpose and, of this podcast is just to hopefully inspire individuals to chase their passions. And I know that's sometimes a hard thing. So I'm like, you know what, chase your interests, chase your curiosities. You can create a profession in that, and just to take choosing your profession more serious. It's not about the hours. It's not about the money. I believe it's about, expressing yourself authentically in whatever fashion that could be. It could be numbers, it could be art, it could be business. Like to me, what you're expressing yourself is should be dependent on you as an individual and what your interests are. But hearing your story and the risks you took and the chances you took on yourself I think is going to be inspiring to a lot of people. But to get anyone off the traditional career path and to take a chance on themselves and kind of pave their own way, any last, statements you want to say?
I think I always try to think like there's probably 100 other people that could do my job and potentially better. But the one thing you always want to do is, for sure, you want to be the hardest working person in that room. So, and with that kind of overrides and everything else kind of falls in place. Like I grew up in a small town in Ohio and made ski films eventually because I used to idolize skiers, hang pictures of them up in my locker, like, all these tricks and things. And 10 years later, I'm like working with the same people that were pros back in the day. And just like, if I went back and told my high school version of me that like I've shot with people like Tanner Hall, I wouldn't be able to like comprehend. But it just kind of happened. It wasn't like a very clear path. And it was just like a lot of mistakes that I learned from and led to something. But yeah, it's sometimes good to sit back and say, it feels good to accomplish the goals you wanted, but now I'm already on to chasing other goals. So it's probably need to be better at being present and appreciating the steps along the way, but you can kind of do anything you want as long as you work hard and you're passionate. Like people aren't going to turn away somebody that's like super hardworking. If they knocked on your door at work and they worked their ass off and they cared so much and they showed up and they put 110% in, even if they weren't there in, knowledge, you would take them under their wing, I would most likely, and continue to help them grow to get to where they need to be. So just do things you love doing, because it would suck to live a life having a job that you kind of don't really, really love, or like you said, you're always thinking about your work, or your biggest fear is not doing what you're doing. That's the type of mentality to have.
Yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate. I mean, I don't know what the studies are today, but the last time I looked at Gallup, it was like the percentage was sad of the amount of people who find satisfaction or meaning or purpose in their work. And they have a pretty good survey that they ask. I mean, I think it's like in the teens, like 15, 16, 17%. And I frequently, ask somebody, it's like, how many people do you know who love what they do? That question's relatively low, but someone like you're surrounded by these people, and that's why I said, like, you're world class at creating, I think, this environment that inspires you. And I don't think that's very easy to do always. It sounds easy in theory, just be around people, but I just think it's such an important aspect that sometimes gets overlooked. And you brought that to fruition today, at least for me, to understand that, those people around you are sometimes more important than some of the other aspects that we give far more weight to. So thank you for that.